So first of all, I thank Professor Arnold for this invitation to share some of the research in this conference. So it's already getting delayed. So without further delay, let me start actually this talk. So today I'm going to talk about, just a minute, actually I need to put 1 minute. So today I will talk about this network of coupled lasers and its potential applications. So this is the main entrance of IIT Roper. For those who do not know about this place, this is just 250 kilometers away from Delhi in north. So this is a second generation IIT in India. So, okay. So why we want to study this network of coupled lasers? So here I have listed some of the applications. Of course, actually, when you couple the lasers, the high powers with tight focusing can be generated, which can be used in defense. They can also be used to do the laser fusion experiments, where you see like many rays which are having the fixed phase relation. They can be tightly focused, and the energy can be raised to a very high level, and they can enable the fusion of these nuclei. And similarly, it can be used for industrial applications where cutting and building can be done. So it's just a partial list where you can find plenty more. Apart from it, a new area is also emerging where the physical platforms are being exploited for the computing. So this is called coherent optical computing. The particular emphasis is to solve optimization problems. And this category is NP-hard, non-deterministic polynomially time hard problems. These are also known as computationally hard problems. So by using the physical processes of these systems, they can perform the computing. So this is also called an analog computing, where the problem is mapped on some universal spin systems in an analog fashion, and it is reduced to solve the spin Hamiltonian. So I will talk more about it, how exactly actually it maps on lasers and how the lasers can be advantageous to do such computing. So this computing, we can investigate, for example, these spin systems. We can actually try to analyze these properties of different kind of systems, where experimentally they may not be possible. For example, when you cool those systems in condensed matter. In that scenario, these platforms can be very advantageous. We can also actually study several kind of complex networks, because networks appear everywhere. So these laser networks, they can also be actually used to do that. Traveling salesman is a very well-known problem in computational physics. It's also one of the NP-hard problem. This can also be actually solved with the help of the network of coupled lasers. But apart from this net optimization problems occurs in several other fields as well, like either making these drugs and which involves the computational chemistry, or like these power grid networks, social networks, so different kind of stuff. So in all these applications of the network of lasers, one thing is common: we need to phase lock them. So let me remind you actually what is the phase locking is. So you simply take the two lasers and look the far field. So here, for example, in the far field, we get a Gaussian. So it indicates that their relative phases are not constant. Now, actually, if you couple the laser by just injecting light from one to another, and again look at the far field, instead of getting Gaussian, we got a now interference fringes, which indicates now the relative phase between the lasers is constant. It is indicated by this fringe pattern. Here, particularly, we have a darkness in the center, which indicates a relative phase of pi, out of phase locking of the lasers. Now we require them to couple. So there are various methods by which the lasers can be coupled, but we use this particular method, which is known as diffractive coupling. So now actually we have created the two lasers from a same cavity by putting a mask. It's a metallic mask, and there are two holes where the light can go through it, and the other parts are opaque. The light will be blocked. So accordingly, the gain medium is split into two parts. They are now actually equivalent to two lasers. So now how we couple them? For to do that, we just move the output coupler away from the mask. Now when the light actually passes through these holes, it expands during because of the diffraction. Now it hits the coupler, comes back. So during this free space propagation, and as a result of diffraction, the light gets expanded. Now you see actually a tail, this is shown in the green curves. The tail part of this Gaussian, it leaks into the neighboring holes. That's how the light is injected from one laser to another. Now the problem here again, actually, some of the light also falls on this opaque part. So that is the loss. The laser does not like this loss. So they actually needs to minimize this loss. And how this can be minimized? By finding a proper phase distribution between the lasers. So for example, here, if they find a common phase pi, like a 0 and pi relative phase pi, then actually the light here, it destructively interferes, it becomes 0. So this is shown by this black curve. So it means like this dissipative coupling, it can be used to find a proper phase configuration between the laser. So this is the mechanism we actually use to force the laser to find a proper phase configuration. So in this particular case, the coupling is short range. It is given by this expression. This is the overlap between the fields of these two lasers. And it's a short range. It is also dissipated because there's a loss and it minimizes the loss in order to find the correct phase distribution. Now, how we create the large array of lasers in a particular network. So this is we created in a degenerate laser cavity. So it consists of a big gain medium, which we pump by using flash lamp. And then we have a telescope that is put inside the cavity. This telescope ensures a perfect imaging inside the cavity. And what exactly this means? If you take any field distribution on this plane output coupler, then after a round trip, it exactly maps onto itself. So any point on this output coupler, it will not actually affect the other point. So in general, by this configuration, we can have hundreds of thousands of spatial modes. It can be supported by this cavity. And they will all be degenerate in losses because they are lasing from the same cavity. So we are exploiting this degenerate property in order to create a large array of laser. So what we do actually, we take a metallic mask where the holes are drilled, and the diameter of these holes are 200 micron, and center to center, two neighboring holes are separated by 300 micron. Now, when we do this, now you see actually this large gain medium, now it is splitted into several lasers. This is the experimental image of these lasers. When you zoom in, then each laser you see actually it has a fundamental Gaussian distribution. So we can create actually a large array of lasers in this way. And now to ensure that all the lasers that we created are independent. So what we do actually, we select one laser by a pinhole and then look at the far field. So a single laser, when you do the Fourier, it becomes a bigger Gaussian. Now we compare the far field of the single laser with the far field of an array of lasers. Then we see it still is a Gaussian. So it's, and it is more intense. This is due to the fact that all the lasers are incoherently added. So the intensity goes up and we do not see the fringes. It means like they are completely independent. Now, in order to couple them, we use the same trick. We move the output coupler away, and this distance is again actually chosen by this Talbot method. So here, for example, we are choosing quarter Talbot distance. So back and forth is a half Talbot. So it's a well-known Talbot effect where a periodic image during the propagation, it repeats this image. And in addition to that, it also actually acquires a phase during the propagation. So now actually with this method, we again actually now this see the far field instead of a Gaussian, we got this narrow diffraction peaks, which indicates the phase locking of the lasers. In this particular negatively coupling means like we have phase lock in the out of phase configuration that is indicated by the darkness in the center. So here the lasers are 0 pi kind of configuration. We can also phase lock the lasers in the in phase. This requires to just put the output coupler more far away distance, that is called full Talbot distance. Then this phase locking turns into the in phase configuration where the light is now concentrated mostly on the at the center. However, this actually, when you put this output coupler more away and away, this phase locking becomes, particularly in the in phase configuration, becomes too lossy. So it is not a good idea to go for this full Talbot distance. So what we can do actually, okay, that I will talk just in the next slide. But with this method, we can generate the array of lasers in all kind of configurations. For example, here I have shown in triangular array, this is the far field of it, hexagonal array, Kagome array, or some kind of other configuration, even random network of lasers we can also create. Now, actually, in all the cases, we efficiently phase lock in the out of phase configuration as it indicated by this darkness in the center. To do the in phase and to convert all this energy in a single point, we need to convert them to in phase. So either we do this, but this is a very lossy. It may not be a good idea to do that. We used a different trick by doing this second harmonic generation. So when you double the frequency, then we also double the phase. So the lasers, for example, here, this is the unit of the square array of laser, where 0 pi 0 pi. Now you do the second harmonic, you double the frequency, you double the phases. So it becomes 0 2 pi 0, which is nothing like a 0 0. We have converted out of phase to in phase lasers. So here we have this array of lasers which are at this wavelength 1064, and this is the far field. Now when we do this second harmonic, it is done outside by using this KTP crystal. So we just focus the light onto this crystal, and the second harmonic generation happens. Now we see this is the far field of the second harmonic generation. So the light is now converted and focused at the center. So this is the trick actually that we use to convert the out of phase lock lasers into the in phase, by which we can concentrate the light. Now, actually, the second thing that I want to talk about this computational thing. So this is by this physical platform, we can perform this analog computing. This is not, this is different than the digital computation, like the classical computers that we are using, where we are using these logical operations. But on these physical simulators, that is called analog computing, where the problem is mapped on these universal spin models. And then the problem is reduced to find the ground state of those spins Hamiltonian. So to do that, our laser system, it should be identical to the XY, these spin systems. So here I have shown the mapping of these lasers to these XY spins. So in lasers, there are different degrees of freedom. You have amplitude, you have frequency, polarization, phase. Let's assume all the lasers have the same amplitude, frequency, and polarization, only the phases are different. So the phase can take the value from 0 to 2 pi. Now, if you phase lock the lasers into out of phase configuration where the phases are 0 pi 0 pi, now it is equivalent to the spin where up down spin configuration. So it's a perfectly analogy to the antiferromagnet. So this is not only the analogy. If you look this mathematical modeling as well, then these lasers can be modeled with a well-known Komoto phase oscillator model. Now the steady state of this phase oscillator model, it will be completely identical to the ground state of this classical XY Hamiltonian. So this is a perfect analogy. It allows the lasers to simulate this spin Hamiltonian, and then accordingly we can solve these optimization problems. Now actually here, when you are doing this computation, then you have to run your actually computation for many iterations. Then this problem is now actually you have to sample several these repetitions, and accordingly look the distribution, which one is the most probable solution, and that would be the optimal solution. So here's one example that I have shown. People have taken this one-dimensional ring array of lasers. It has the best solution, that is a ferromagnetic. All the spins should be aligned in same direction. However, it also has many other valid solutions, but they can be equivalent to the locally stable solutions. So when they perform this fair sampling, now you see actually this sort of distribution comes. So we have this probability for this optimal solution that is the highest. So this indicates this is the most probable solution of a given network of these lasers. We did this fair sampling rapidly with our this special array of lasers. So this is the symmetric of the degenerate cavity, and this is the Mach-Zehnder interferometer. So how we performed, actually we did this fair sampling by measuring the coherence function. So here, for example, this is the interference pattern. We generated the array of laser, and where a single laser interferes with itself and with all the other lasers. So accordingly, we get the interference pattern. Now from this interference pattern, we calculate the coherence, and then accordingly, we can also determine the phase by calculating the fringe shift with respect to a reference laser. So it gives us the information about the phase distribution as well as the coherence. Now the second good thing about this simulator, it has the massive parallelism. What exactly it is? So we have at the output of the laser this array of lasers. If you again look at the individual laser, then actually there will be multiple longitudinal modes. So for this particular case, we have the gain bandwidth, which is NdAg here, is 32 gigahertz, and depending on this spacing between or length of the cavity, we have the spacing between two successive modes, 128 megahertz. So overall, we are getting 250 longitudinal modes from these individual lasers. So these all 250 longitudinal modes, they form an ensemble of approximately 250 identical but independent simulators. So these form a massive parallelism, because now you see in one shot, we have all these 250 experiments. So by doing this one shot, we have the fair sampling. So now actually we have demonstrated few examples. I have listed only 2 examples. So let me talk first the simplest case. This is a network of a triangular lattice where the lasers are situated in a particular lattice. It has only one best solution. This is the ground state landscape. This is shown by the minima in this landscape. This is the in phase. Now, when we perform this experiment, this is the in phase locked case where a sharp narrow peak indicates the long range phase ordering in this triangular lattice. Now, when we look at the coherence, you see actually all the lasers having the good coherence. So it means like all the lasers are phase locked, long range phase ordering. When we look at the phases, again, all the lasers have the same phase. It means all the 250 repeat simulations, they all converge to the same ground state. So we can clearly see we have found a single ground state in these lattice. Now we have gone to the more complicated case where there are 2 degenerate ground states. In this case, where the negatively coupled lasers in triangular lattice, vortex and anti-vortex. So in this case, actually, again, we look the far field and then measure the coherence. And this coherence now have a oscillatory behavior. It collapses and revives. So this oscillation is just because of the averaging of these 2 degenerate ground states. It is also actually reflected on this phase distribution. So we can clearly, by looking at these coherence measurements, we can identify and can find these whether the laser have the single ground state or double degenerate ground states, or even highly frustrated system as well. So then actually we have also explained by using this cartoon picture. So actually, because lack of the time, I'm not going to detail about it. This is just like the cross section of the coherence function. We can clearly see the difference, and we can identify the ground state on these different lattice networks. And I think actually, how much time I have?
I think almost all time is finished already.
Okay, so I think then I will go just like a conclusion. Okay. So we also actually showed the relation to Kip-Belzuric mechanism that occurs in very broad areas in cosmology, in condensed matter. Even people actually did with the Bose-Einstein condensation. We mimicked with the lasers. And this was also actually people in Nature highlighted. It's a laser model for cosmology. So it's also okay. So I think actually I'm concluding with here. So I want to thank some of the people. So some of the work that I did during my postdoc at Weizmann Institute of Science in Israel. Now I am having my own group at IIT Roper. These are my PhD students are there. So with that, I am actually stopping here. So in case you have any question, I will be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you for presentation. So are there any questions? It was more theoretical work. So you make experiments or theory or?
No, these are both experiment theory. Most of the results I have shown the experimental thing.
Okay. Yeah. Looks interesting and nice presentation.
Question.
You have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, Naresh, please.
Vishwa, this is Naresh.
Yeah.
Okay, if you use a quadrilateral or off-talbot, basically it gives an imaginary coupling. But the imaginary coupling will give you very lossy far fields.
Yeah.
But generally, we can't use a lossy far field for an application point of view. And is there any other other ways to compensate these losses in the far field? And use a Talbot technique, particularly instead of using a Fourier filtering techniques.
Yeah, Fourier filtering we can use actually. In fact, we have done this. So this Talbot coupling enables us to do the nearest neighbor coupling. So if you want to do, let's say in Fourier, so it will be a long range coupling.
Yeah.
So depending on, let's say in this particular cavity, let me go back to this slide. I think actually it will be easy to explain. In this here, for example, so here you see like these are the near fields and here we have the far field. So by putting some pinhole aperture, and then we can accomplish this long range coupling. So we can actually do the in phase locking, out of phase locking, depending on the size of that aperture. I have not shown the results, we have already done that.
Yeah, I can understand.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. So we